Welcome, everybody. We are back with another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Happy Friday to all. Real excited today. We're gonna really go through some really interesting things around like my passion. The show title is How to Deploy Projects Faster, Projects Faster and Safer. Really excited for my guest today, Devon Artis. He's a senior security solution architect. And I want to read his bio real quick. Before I even go into the bio, welcome to the show, Devon. Really nice to have you, man. This is a long
Thank you.
time coming.
Thank you. Thank
Uh,
you. I appreciate it. Thanks for
Devon
having me.
Artist. No problem at all. No problem at all. Thanks for being a guest. I'm gonna be really excited to jump into this topic and get your take on a lot of stuff. I know we talk offline a lot, but it'll be really great to dive into some things. So, bio Devon Artis is a senior cloud security solution architect, SecDevOps engineer, and blockchain architect with over 7 years of experience working in multi-cloud environments, distributed ledgers, with over 20 years working in IT. Definitely welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. No complaints. The weather's nice. I'm sitting outside, just enjoying the weather, man. Just being
Uh,
at peace, you know.
that's
And
totally
it's Friday.
happy Friday to everyone. That's a fact. That's a big fact. So how we do it on the show, before we jump into the main topic, which is how to deploy safer and faster fintech projects, we're going to get into the news of the week, some articles that we found interested, and we'll just touch base on that, and then we'll get into the topic of the show. So let me add that to the screen. So our first topic of the day, that institutions buying Bitcoin rather than gold as inflation cranks up. So, there was a rally this week with Bitcoin. It says a 35% rally, currently soaring to about like 50, I think 55,000 was the high. There's articles published. A lot of institutions are from an institutional side, they're investing in Bitcoin. According to a note shared by JP Morgan with clients on Thursday, the recent increase in price for BTC was predominantly attributed to institutional investors looking for a hedge to inflation. A couple of things that they're saying: the endorsement of Bitcoin by major banks and regulators is going to accelerate the collapse of gold and the rise of Bitcoin as a preferred safe haven store of value for both institutional and retail investors. Um, it's so funny because despite some divisions of JP Morgan expressing a growing interest in crypto assets, CEO Jamie Dimon stated in an interview on Monday that he remains a skeptic of Bitcoin and even compared it to a little bit of fool's gold. So he's been a critic of Bitcoin for a few years now. What are your thoughts on that, Devon?
um, JP Morgan behind the scenes, they've always been looking at their own thing with blockchain. But yeah, I think Bitcoin is definitely a hedge to gold. And the irony, um first years ago he said that he would fire anybody who started getting into Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. Now, because the investors looking like, hey, wait a minute, we want a part of this, and he's a business, and
Yeah,
as a businessman, he has to make business decisions, and his business decision is, well, my clients want it, then I have to move forward with it. So I think it's going to continue to go up, and I think as more people um, start getting, once this become mainstream, I could see other coins or other cryptocurrencies doing the same exact thing. So this is part of the process. That's the way I see it.
even though you look at Bitcoin, the rise of it since 2008, things like Ethereum 2016, and a ton of others coming out within those years, and you start looking at the functionality, it's still early in the game. I think very early in the game. That's why I don't. When you see these prices, I think in April, it was worth 64,000, and it did a
Hmm.
spike down to 30,000. Look, it's going to fluctuate, right? We're so early in the game. I mean, the crypto's one aspect. I mean, you look at places like El Salvador right now that totally adopted it as a country. Like it's so early. I mean, and what's happening now, China put a ban on a lot of it. So you're seeing, things like the US picking up. And I think that's going to lead to our next article. So, on that same note, US Bank launches Bitcoin custody service as institutions race to cater to the crypto demand. So US Bank is the 5th largest retail bank in the nation. Just to give some perspective, US Bank was founded in 1863 during the Civil War. It's a top 10 player in custody with more than 8.6 trillion in assets under custody and administration, according to the data from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So similar, giving the people what they want, right? So that's one of the services that they're offering to their client. It's a cryptocurrency custody service. It's available to fund managers. The offering will help investment managers store private keys for Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, and Litecoin with the help of sub-custodian NYDIG. According to So I mean, same concept, man. I mean, you kind of see the writing on the wall. Like, no one can predict the price of what Bitcoin will be next month, or any of these things will be next month, or next year, or so forth. But obviously, a lot of the institutional investors are very interested, and I think from reading all these articles, that's what the big drive was. It was at one point retail. I think last year a lot of retail investors drove it up. Now we're seeing the institutions jumping on it. What are your thoughts on that?
This is classic to me. They're just trying to get in where they fit in. So, doing a custodial service or custody service, the only problem I see with that is now you're giving them your private keys. So the whole premise was now you become the bank. You hold on. You're responsible for your private keys. You're responsible for the custody. So now you're giving the bank the custody of the same way you're giving them the custody of your money. Why? But for those who would rather feel safe with the bank holding it, I understand. Well, I don't understand because is it insured? It's crypto. They can't insure it. So, the bank is just finding a way to get in without, but I don't imagine there's going to be any real insurance on that because it can't be FDIC insured by the federal. And again, I don't know enough information, but I doubt it very much.
I I don't know the details about how that works in terms of if how that process would work. But I like your point that you made up. Like a lot of people that are in the community, it's really the whole idea of being bankless, right? The whole idea of controlling your own funds, controlling your own asset. So
Exactly.
By now giving that to the bank, it kind of defeats the point of that aspect. But if you just look at it as a pure investment vehicle, a hedge against inflation, and they're just saying, listen, that's another way to look at it. Like you said, it's just another way. Some people don't want to be responsible for. I mean, there's countless stories where certain keys were lost and people took time to regain that. So
agreed. But if they get hacked, what is the responsibility of I've given the bank my private key? So what that means is I had to have had my private keys initially. They're not saying that they're going to be an exchange. So that meant I had it, I gave it to them. And what is the risk associated with them holding your keys? And if there's no more protection, what's the difference is the system admin gets a handle of the key and they pull out all the funds. I'm looking at the security side of it is how secure is that, and who's responsible if someone does get those private keys and take all the funds. But nonetheless, yeah, they're finding a way to make sure that they stay in the game. And it's
That,
business
yeah,
as usual, right?
yeah, they're in the business. They're in the business of money. So that right
Exactly.
now is a new asset class that
Most definitely.
figure out how to stay in. I mean, totally agree with you on that. Yeah. So next one. So we brought this up a few months ago when during our in the beginning of one of our shows like we're doing now.
Mhm.
A lot of software companies, pure technology companies, jumping in the fintech space, becoming their own bank. This instance, and then we were talking about Googleplex, and it was gonna. They had banking partners. Citigroup was one of them. They were gonna really enable the mobile banking aspect to make it simpler, easier, and work with their partners. But it seems now they are abandoning that mission. So definitely found that interesting. They say the cancel of Googleplex is due to missed deadlines and a departure of a Google Play executive behind the projects, what the Wall Street Journal says. The move comes 2 years after financial wellness and money management platform, which would have also provided accounts and cards through partnerships with banks such as Citigroup, it was first announced. Yeah, when we first talked about this, I mean, it seemed really interesting. There was some privacy concerns now because, like, you're leveraging Google for everything from your communication to your banking. But if you look at like a company like Facebook, you might not look at that as a fintech, but they own like it's different plays that they're making that they're it's definitely large volumes of money. And we talked about that before. I mean, I think it was it WhatsApp Pay because they own WhatsApp. So it was just the idea of different technology companies moving in this space. So this is one of the first ones from massive company like Google abandoning that play. But they did say that a new strategy will be to deliver digital enablement for banks and other financial services providers rather than us serving as the provider of these services. What are your thoughts on this?
Um, I don't know a lot about Plex. I haven't done a lot of research, so the only feedback I would have is more of the Google side of starting a service and getting rid of things. Google is famous for starting something and then taking it away. Maybe because they have their hand, and they probably the other thing they might have said, they didn't want any issues with the feds or regulations like we're trying to monopolize everything, which they already is going through those issues just like Facebook. So, but again, as far as the project, I don't really know enough to give any real educational insight on it.
No, that's definitely fair enough. Let's at this point let's jump into the topic of the day. Also, guys, if you have any comments, questions, please, as always, let's jump on, add to the comments. We're live right now on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook. So yeah, please feel free to drop in any comments and so forth. Okay, so the topic of the day: how to deploy safer and faster fintech projects. So just when what are some of your thoughts on that particular subjects? I know offline we talk a lot about that and we get into the concept of DevOps, get into the concept of DevSecOps. And for the audience, the idea of like combining development and operations and just a continuous process and looking at the human sides. But I kind of want to get your take as we start diving into it. What are some of the things you've seen over the years in terms of deploying safer and faster projects? And when we say safer, in terms of security and different things of that aspect, especially in the financial space.
So I don't think it is more technical more than collaboration.
Okay.
So in most cases, when we're looking at security and we're looking at safe projects, we don't get security involved till the end of the project versus having them involved tell to actually make it clear what is the service controls that they should be concerned about, helping the dev teams along the way, And then, of course, now later you'll get that pipeline in. But even without a pipeline, without a quote unquote, well, I'm not going to use the word DevOps as much as a CI/CD pipeline. Just having the real DevOps mindset of the collaboration.
And let me add something to that, because the audience might not understand what CI/CD means. It's continuous integration, continuous delivery. And I know in technology we use a ton of acronyms, so I just have to be conscious that some of the audience may not understand that. Please, just want to let's add that into the conversation.
Yeah. So before we get into a pipeline, the same way if we have a pipeline where, and like he said, where we're saying continuous integration, where we're doing things continuously. We're not waiting where in the old model we had a waterfall approach where we had this big picture of what the app should look like, what it's going to do, and we're pushing to dates. That's all we're doing. We're pushing to dates. But to actually deploy safer fintech projects, you definitely want to have the security team or your security engineers involved on onset. So, for example, in some companies where if we're looking at any time the dev team start talking about they're moving to the cloud or they're deployed, especially when we're talking about the cloud, you'll have a security personnel, more likely a cloud security personnel or a DevOps engineer who's specifically trained in these cloud technologies or these automation technologies on the onset, on the calls, just listening to things to look at what's coming down the pipe so we can plan ahead. So, for example, let's say they want to use something like AWS App Config, which is a configuration management for deploying the app, right? You have your security team on ground floor where now they can start thinking, what is the service control that we want to put around this use of this service? And once we can understand what we want to put, we want to make sure it's in line with the baseline. So you just can't just take the regulation. You want to make sure it's in line with the baselines, the company standards and baseline, and start working towards that with the dev teams, with the system administration teams. And in some places, you roll up your sleeve also and get involved.
I mean, it sounds interesting. I know, like, from an industry talk perspective, they have this concept of shift left, exactly what you're talking about. Like, all right, how can we now start shifting security to the left? And when they say left, if you look at it from a left to right perspective, right? In the beginning, you have your development. At the end, you have your, okay, we're going to deploy to production. So the idea of like shifting left is, how do we get security involved early? And what is early? So, to your point, right? It's not even early and we are coding right now. Early is literally we're in the planning stages.
In the planning stage.
We're trying to say, okay, how are we going to provision certain things? What's the outline? We're not even coding it. And then you start thinking about like the threat modeling aspect, because now in that conversation, I mean, to your point, it's cross-functional. It's not just business, the technology and the engineering team. Is really combining all of those entities together. So now you're kind of looking at it holistically from the onset, because it gets tremendously more expensive to do it at the end. I mean, we've seen it in just with clients and just different projects, right? And just case studies in general. So no, definitely. I mean, you brought up also the human side. Can you touch on that?
Well, I would say the human side is having multiple parties involved, different of course I would say diverse, because just having that diverse inclusiveness inside of it, you could think about things that another culture would not have thought about. So ensuring that you're including a diverse culture and an inclusive culture in your pipeline or in your planning stage of your applications. Then I would move forward from a technical side of Safer. When you're deploying, you want to make sure that a security, or if you can, make sure that there's a security personnel on the team, where not so much on the team that before anything is going into production, the security team is also part of that build pipeline. So when the developer do a pull request, it should happen to be approved by someone on a security team. So for example, let's say we're talking about AWS and where the developer wrote some IAM roles. In an ideal case, the security team will review those roles to make sure before that application goes to production that it was reviewed by the security team. Now that you have some other eyes watching, like, oh wow, because the developer is focused on and the business unit is focused on getting this out quickly. But we don't want to stop the business, because if stopping the business, there is no need for security because there's no money coming in, right? So once we understand the value, and now you have your security engineer part of that pipeline, now you're actually looking at safer software. To add to that, let's say, most companies, they're not employing security experts the same way they're employing developers and operations. So what you do is train up those other team members to make sure security is first. Although we're still coding, so if where you've went into organization and you might have seen developers haven't done just base stuff where they're not doing static code analysis, and you're like, why they're not doing that? They're the developers. But if that is being told by leadership that, hey, this has to be done, and then when internal audit looks at this stuff is not being done, now let's ding that BU for not doing it.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, it's good points, right? So, I mean, you definitely see when you look at these projects, it's definitely a disparity between the amount of development resources to the amount of security resources that most companies have, especially when you start looking at things like application security, cloud security, and so forth. So and to your point, it's more so like technology enablement, right? So it's more of a, and when I use consultative, it doesn't mean like from just a pure consultant. You can be an employee, but within the organization, but you're acting almost like a consultant because you are working with these different team members and enabling their you're giving them whether it's tools around static code analysis, whether it's dynamic code analysis. I mean, I've seen things where you integrate security tools into their IDE, their development environment. So it's almost like Microsoft Word in a sense. When they're writing code, it comes up squiggly when they're not adhering to certain coding security practices. And now they're even learning how to, look at things different. And I mean, and it's various things from a peer review perspective, and before you actually release. What are some of the things your thoughts around automation from increasing the speed to production and getting things out?
Well, that depends. It depends on the applications that I think you should automate as much as you can. That's on that, automate as much as you can. But in the same token, we want to ensure that we still stay in line with company policies. So, for example, I actually wrote an article about that where we want to move in this agile framework. We want everything to be agile. We want everything to be automated. But you still have processes that existed before this automation. So, for example, let's say we see a bug Now we can easily remediate this bug. Like I'll do AWS. We're using something called AWS config, which it can always monitor if there's a configuration drift. And if there's a configuration drift that's outside of our regulation, our security standards, we can actually change it back, right? But in most companies, there needs to be some sort of tracking on that. So now we can automate the notification into a JIRA ticket now to allow the security analyst to look at it. So now in a smaller startup, maybe, automate that all the way. But in bigger corporations, you still have that risk management and you still have that, is this even valuable? Do we want to remediate this issue? So automation without following company standards and not following industry regulations is not always the key.
Interesting points. I mean, when you look at like the bigger corps, the enterprise levels, especially the highly regulated ones, right? We talk about financial technology. I mean, there's different levels to whether you're at a startup fintech, you start talking about, bigger enterprises where like they're regulatory heavy, they have to go through a change management process just to release the production versus just pushing things out to prod where maybe in a small, but it's really interesting. Like, so you said like from a smaller perspective, a startup is like you automate, you push out, but is that even right? Like I because that could increase certain risks. Like, so it's something that I like that Capital One. Well, I mean, it's one of those things where I've seen it done. We didn't have it, but the coining of the term, I first learned that coining of the term from Capital One, and it's the idea of release gating. And let me see, because I have an actual pick I can add on. Oh wait, before I go, we have a comment from an audience member. Actually, it was last week's guest, Daniel Fulton. He's a CIO of a fintech firm. All right, let's see. I have an easy time automating a task that a person does. I have a much harder time automating a new task, changing configs, permissions, etc. Yeah, because, and that's because how do you in order to automate something, you kind of need to go through it. And that's a whole other conversation about like, because that topic, as soon as Dan said that, because of stuff I'm doing around AI and machine learning, it's like, how do you automate something that's new? That to me starts, I don't know, I just automatically start thinking about certain aspects around like possible AI and things that can do that. But even in some of the robotic work in the past that I did, you have to have had the steps ready there in order to then to do it. So I can definitely understand the challenge he's having. What are some of your thoughts on what he said?
So I think that challenge comes with not having a written playbook. So if you have a written playbook of step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this, the automation should really become easy. In my opinion, depends on, and I don't want to say easy. So I don't want, but if you can do it manually and it's a written playbook, so we got away from documenting because everything automate, let's do it on the fly. But let's think about, all the configuration management. So if I wanted to install Tomcat or if I wanted to install Nginx on a server, I first need to know how to do it manually, log SSH into the server, and do an apt-get install or a yum update. Whatever I'm going to do, I need to know how to do it manually and go through those manual steps. Once I know the manual steps, I could take a configuration tool or take some Python code and emulate what I did manually. So yeah, if I've not done the playbook and it's a new task and I don't understand the manual process, it would be hard as hell for me to automate something. Totally agree.
Dan, thank you very much for your comment. We appreciate it, and we definitely appreciate our guests looking at. Okay, so yeah, let me see. Dan has another stuff. Exactly the point. Agreed. The written playbook makes security easier for me. Without that, it is hard to I mean, yeah,
I'm
totally,
with them.
totally, yeah,
Yeah,
totally,
that would
totally
be my issue. I agree. I totally agree. Without a written playbook, unless you know it, yeah, I agree with Daniel 100%.
But even if you know it, I get one of the things I've always, even when I talk about like clients and just different, it's that tribal knowledge that's always a worry point, and that's a particular issue. I don't. I'm gonna go off another. That's I think personally, just tribal knowledge it opens you up for potential attacks. Here's what I'm saying. Let that person be out one day, or let that person resign. All of a sudden, because it's not documented and you can't automate it, but a couple of people know it, now all of a sudden that thing's not being done. Whether it's a port not being, it's an exposed port, whether it's, a log file that's not being looked at, whether it's some random server that was supposed to be shut down, but now it's up and it hasn't been patched already, but I know to do it. What you just, I just thought about that. Like, I think that is one of the missing things that a lot of people really don't bring up. It's just that, this dependable person is just always there. They're always working. But all of a sudden something happens to him or her. And, I forgot that. Oh, I didn't even know that we haven't looked at that server in like a year and it hasn't been patched. That's a potential attack vector. So I just thought about it when you said that. So playbooks to both Dan's point and your point, extremely important. Thanks, Dan, for that comment. Excellent stuff. Hey,
and can I add, those playbooks also come from kind of the beginning of the conversation when I talked about service controls. And you have your service controls, which is not written in go. We're giving you the service control on this service or this configuration or this permission. We come up with the written service control because it has to be written. Then after the service control, you have another team, or depending on your bandwidth, you have a baseline. Now you're going to write out that baseline. So now when we hand that off to the developer teams, they already have some sort of baseline to make it a lot easier. So it's a team effort, but yeah, if we're looking at one person, someone's writing that written service control, someone's now writing that baseline, and that could be codified, which should be codified. Then now we're looking at the baseline is going to integrate with the enterprise standards, because someone says you should do this or this might be best practice, there could be a reason why we're not doing it. So we still want to stay in line with our baseline. But I don't want to. But yep, I don't want to digress from.
No, it's all good. I mean, before the comments, one thing that I was going to bring up, and just to I want to give credit where credit is due. I mean, this whole release gating concept was, I think, from Capital One. But the whole concept is, even with automation, you can automate it, but you just have certain things in place that, what's this thing done? Where are these things done? Things like, your source code version control, obviously, your static analysis we talked about, vulnerability scans, open source scans, a lot of the things with, codes leveraging libraries that are, sometimes there's no, what is it called? What I'm using acronyms now. Software composition analysis, SCA. So and the whole idea is, even with automation and even to the point of the playbook, is having these things in that has to be done prior to pushing something out and going through to ensure that they've been done. That itself can be automated. Devon, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it could be automated. I'm still, maybe, I don't know, man, I'm still a little old school. I still think, yeah, we do need those gates matter, but I still think sometimes moving a little slower is quicker, because any code, someone who code, they can automate everything. But it becomes the same way where we're just so used to getting up there and coding, we didn't take the time to think about me automating this. How would this affect something else? So there still has to be a lot of planning. And again, getting back to that collaboration. The only reason I like to make that clear, because now we'll just have a bunch of developers automating everything and say, oh, it doesn't matter, we could just automate it. But there could be a risk associated with automating everything.
I can see that. Have you seen cases like that?
No, because the reality is, in the field, I have not seen everything that has been automated. That's where I'm getting this from, the field, where, yeah, my mind jumped in when I first, like, yeah, why we're not doing this? Why we're not automating this? And then I realized someone said, well, if you do that, here's what's going to happen. And I'm like, oh, there's no unless we're going to sit there and start writing a full application to now those audit logs that we needed to put in place for the auditor who reads stuff, who doesn't read code, we need those written. But if I just automated it, then I might can. And again, we could just go down a rabbit hole of automation. So we could say, well, let's say you're the bad actor internally. You keep on opening up the security group to the internet, to 000. And you do that. But now I haven't automated, because I don't have the manpower now to automate keeping a track on that. Right? So now instead, I leave it there. We track you and say, hey, Nnamdi, you've done this 3 times. You're no longer using that system, or you're out of here. You're in violation. So sometimes not automating everything can help you see some of the holes, which doesn't sound good when we're talking DevOps, but when we talk about automation, because the word DevOps is used too much to mean automation versus the collaboration of software deployment and systems deployment. Does that make sense?
No, I mean, look, coming from you know what? It makes perfect sense. And I'm going to add this picture in real quick. Got this from the Linux Academy. Actually, it's a good course that they had there around DevSecOps. I always like to get different perspectives and stuff. And there was a point in time, to your point, with the collaboration, and I, like you worked in the industry long enough to remember where you developed something, you just literally just threw it over to production support to manage it. Yeah, that was it. And then things will crash, and then they'll have to figure it out. And then years later, it was like, okay, let's make this a development and operations collaboration. But I saw this picture, and I didn't design it, by the way, but I really, really like it because of the circular aspect of it, where you have the release gating, you have the planning, the coding, you have the building of software, you have the continuous quality, those gates that we talked about, you have the automated deployment, you have the even after it's deployed, it's like, now you have to monitor it, then it feeds back into your KPIs, and then you adapt. It's that whole loop. I saw this picture. I mean, this picture's been used tremendously. This similar circle in 8. Same time you talk about DevOps, you see it. But I just really like how this was designed and the different aspects of it. And I think it takes, and to your point also, it takes a collaborative effort mixed with different teams to accomplish this. I feel, and especially with the feedback loops and so forth. So
this seems more of the older model, or this is not the nirvana that we're trying to reach, in my opinion, because again, this is the same model. The dev, even though this is just automation, but this is not what I would call secure, because right here we have I'm looking like you can see. We have planning, coding, and building, but we don't have security in that. We wait till we get to the release gating, then security gets involved.
Oh, I see. I see your point. Good point. Excellent point. And I think I don't know if I might have been using an older one, but yeah, to your point, the static code analysis and the different things within that coding and even threat modeling should definitely be in this
Should have
picture.
been done
100%.
here. Yep.
100% agree. I 100% agree with you. Not totally agree with you on that.
So the
That's
only
part of
thing
it.
is, the release gating, we're gonna, regardless they want to call it release gate or not, we still always had an approval, and security always had to do approval. Where even I remember I was doing when I first jumped into the cloud, I'm like, oh yeah, I've done all this, and they're like, oh, we can't go because we need a pen test. What do you mean you need a pen test? They needed to pen test the cloud architect that I just deployed. It's already working. Everything's right. Everything wasn't right. I didn't know, even from infrastructure, that we supposed to be doing this. That Tomcat server shouldn't be doing this. So if somebody in security, and that pen test took time to do, even though they still would have had to do it. Now they have a bunch of remediations that I had to do. That's the release gating, because we couldn't release. And this is like 6-7 years ago. So if we follow that model, be it infrastructure as code or where we wait, because that security piece right there, that release gating could be pen testing, it could be, but if we had somebody, at least from just the look at, here's my architect design, here's what I'm proposing to do. Hey, security team, could you review this and tell me this is good?
To add to that point and modify, this might be an older picture. You're right. The planning aspect, like we talked about earlier, that's when you have your threat modeling aspect. That's when then you start putting within the coding and building, you start then putting in certain security controls, whether it's, the software composition analysis, the static code. No, 100%. I just always like the picture, but you're right. In addition, it's adding certain security pieces within those aspects, like we talked about. 100% agree with you.
Agree. No, I definitely love that picture. That is definitely, because a lot of times we're not even there. So, so
right?
I'm looking at Nirvana versus, hey, this organization is not even there. Security doesn't show up until there's a breach or there's a data leak, because security's never looked at it. We just release without security even gating. So no, that is still a good picture. So I'm really talking about the Nirvana of
but actually, it's definitely the Nirvana, but I think it's very doable to add certain things. If you have your CI/CD already, and adding these static code and adding certain security controls. I mean, it can even be things that looking at the format of the code, like we in other aspects, like whether it's linting and just the structure of it and just getting that similar to catch certain things. I mean, it's various things that can be done even now. I mean, just as long as a company or an organization is moving towards that particular direction. Listen, we're at 45-minute mark. I know me and you could keep going and talking, and it's always a good thing, but I know you have some appointments and things to do. So, and I want to be respectful of your time, and I definitely appreciate you showing up today. So, a couple of things. One, if the people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way to do so?
They could reach me on LinkedIn. I could send that to you. Or they could definitely hit me on Twitter. Reach me at Devon Artis on Twitter. That's my Twitter, and I'll send you all the information where everyone can get in touch with me.
Definitely add it to the chat and so forth. You said it's your Twitter username is Devon Artis.
Yep, I added it to the chat.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you added it to the chat. You added it to the private chat. Let me post it to the regular chat for the audience, and I'll post it on the screen as well. so people
Okay.
can be part of the video. 1 second, I'll do
And,
that right now.
and I just because I don't see how to the private chat. I linked in my LinkedIn.
Oh, you put I'll put your Twitter, okay, and your LinkedIn. I'll do it in separate channels. I'll do it right now. And what I'll do is it gets added everywhere. Unfortunately, LinkedIn doesn't allow us to post, but what I'll do is I'll put it, boom. That's Devon's Twitter handle. So it's part of the video now. And I'll do similar for your LinkedIn. On when I do comments from this platform, it goes everywhere except for LinkedIn. It goes on YouTube. So I just have to post it. I'll just do the video aspect. 1 second. Cool. And that's Devon's LinkedIn handle. So now it's part of the video forever, so people can see it.
Cool.
Just leave it for a second, and you can pause the video when you need it. Listen, as always, thank you for your time today. Thank you for showing up. I really appreciate it. Definitely a friend of the show. I know you span topics around DevOps, DevSecOps, blockchain, just different ways in cloud security. So definitely topics that we cover in the future and talk through. As always, man, thank you very much. To the audience, thank you for viewing the show. Just a quick shout out to next week's show. Same time, same bat channel. We're going to get into decentralized finance. It's going to be something you do not want to miss. We'll be doing the marketing and posting of that shortly. And to have a happy Friday. Thanks for viewing in.
Hey, it's been great, and thank you for inviting me. I definitely appreciate the conversation. And you know how me and you we could be here for hours, and business as usual. Got to get back to it.
Wait, hold on. We have a last comment. Does he do consulting and review of existing systems for small businesses?
Yes, I do.
Well, there you go. Yeah, there you go. Awesome. So so on that note, definitely thanks again. And guys, take care. Thanks for viewing the show every Friday, 12 p.m. the Tech Behind FinTech, where we talk about the technology behind the money. You'll catch us again on a weekly basis. Take care and have a great weekend. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.